Good evening. I have a couple of questions before we start tonight. If you missed the memo, it's a very long show. It goes until 10:30. You've been warned. Please take care of yourselves, and I mean that emotionally, physically, and if you need to go out and have a post-traumatic cigarette, you are free to go do it. Who was at the show last night? Was anyone at the show last night? You are so weird. I fucking love you, but wow. And actually, Sybil, can I just have a teeny bit of house light? I didn't ask this last night, and I'm curious. Who in the house has never seen me before? And who has seen me before? Okay, good. Because this is a weird first date, I gotta say. If you've never seen me, it's not always like this, I promise. I won't ever do this again. I just have a lot of things to say right now. Things are feeling very fucking dark in general. You know, not just with the election coming up and with what is going on in my home country. I don't know if you've heard about it's bad. And
Lock him up.
Let's not do that. We have a curfew. And here's the thing, I have been talking my whole career about my own insecurities and about imposter syndrome and how hard it is sometimes to be an artist and feel like you even have a right to be doing it. And the darker things get outside, even though I have spent so much time and done so much work to be okay with doing this weird job, there's a kind of a paradox, because the older I get, the more actual grown-up real friends I have who have real jobs, real jobs, people who make real things that aren't quite so ephemeral and abstract, people who make, there's my friend the dentist, there's people who make computers, and people who make shoes, and people who make bridges, and medicine, and government policy, real things. That seem to have an actual impact on the world. And you can start getting really insecure even after years of doing this as an artist, wondering what am I making that's actually helping, especially as things are feeling like they're going to hell in a handbasket. And I knew I wanted to be an artist from way early on. And I remember looking at my first Cyndi Lauper record when I was 9. I'm thinking if that's a job, I want that job. And my early musical influences actually, came from, like a lot of us, from my parents. My mom had a very small record collection, but it was good, robust, 60s and 70s music. It was the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and she had some Doors records. And then I got into my own music, I bust out on my own, and I started buying my own tapes and records. And there was a lot of Cyndi Lauper and Madonna and Prince and Duran Duran and stuff like that. And then when I started heading into my teens, everyone goes through that awkward point when your taste is just really questionable. And you're trying to figure out who you are. And I started having, maybe arguably questionable taste in music. I was really into pop music, but I was really into the Cocktail soundtrack. And I loved it. And Cats. I loved Cats. I listened to it over and over again. I will not apologize for that. It's pretty good. And I also, around this time, 14 years old, I was also developing very questionable taste in men. I do not know if anyone can relate to this. I had a thing very specifically for older, sadistic, troubled, trench coat wearing, drug dealing, angry. That was my type. I loved them so much. And there was this one guy in particular I was completely obsessed with. He was 17, I was 14. And he was by no means my boyfriend. He never would have said that. I never would have said that. When I talked about him in my journal, I called him the corruptor. He's the corruptor. I'm going to see the corruptor this weekend. And he would pick me up in his car. I would sneak out of my house and we would like go to the woods or go to a parking lot, or sometimes he would sneak me into his house up to his bedroom and he would get me high and he would give me blowjob lessons. And I thought this was the height of sophistication. And, doing really sophisticated, amazing, mature things with the corruptor. And one weekend, in the middle of winter, he picked me up, and it was the middle of the day, and he took me to his house, and his parents weren't home. But instead of taking me up to his bedroom, he took me to the basement. And it was freezing cold outside, and there was no heat in the basement, so it was very shivery, and he said, "Take your clothes off." And I was like, sophisticated. And then I was naked, and he tied me to a table. And he said, "It's my friend's birthday. They're going to be a surprise present." I was 14. And I do not think that it's a coincidence that it was just about this point in time that I started developing a better taste in music. And actually, for the first time in my life, writing my first good songs. And I was really lucky. I had a couple of influences come in from outside and veer me in the right direction, especially my older brother, Carl, who I worshipped. He was 6 years older than me and wore a leather jacket and played bass and had long blonde hair and was a painter. And he was an icon. And he was the only other artist in my family. And he took me aside one day, right around this time, and was like, "Listen, Amanda, Madonna is okay. You need to listen to The Cure." And all of a sudden, I was accessing this whole other side of music, The Cure and Nick Cave and PJ Harvey and Leonard Cohen and all these people who were singing about the dark. And that's where I knew I wanted to head. I wasn't quite sure how you did it, but that was right around the time in my life that I started writing music all the time. Every day I would run home from school. I had this tape recorder on the piano in my parents' living room, and I would record everything I did, and I would improvise and stuff and record everything. And I've listened back to those recordings. They are very bad. But there are moments of pure gold on these recordings, especially these moments where my parents come into the room and don't know the tape is right. There is this recording of my stepdad coming in and going, "Amanda, it's 10 o'clock at night. Some of us have to work in the morning. Plus, you're not even making music. You're just going bang, 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 bang on the piano. I think you need a therapist. You need to shake yourself. You're just getting your aggressions out on the piano." It was this rickety old Steinway that hadn't been touched or refurbished in like 100 years. And the strings were so brittle that they couldn't even be tuned to concert pitch. And every time I broke one of these, I don't know if you know about piano strings, they're not like guitar strings, they're really expensive to replace, especially if they have to be made by hand because they're from an old piano. So every time one of the strings broke, this old Armenian man had to come to our house with his piano bag. And he would look at me like I was bad at hurting the piano. But in my mom's defense, she never made me pay for any of those strings, which I actually don't take for granted. She never punished me, she never took it out of my allowance. I think she just wrote a check for $80 every single time the string broke. But I also think, yay, Mom. At the same time, I think at some level she knew, subconsciously or consciously, that it was still cheaper than therapy. And there I was on this table, tied to it, freezing. And it felt like I was there for a very, very long time. You know, it felt like hours. It was probably not hours. It was probably 20 minutes. But my friends know this about me. There's nothing more despicable to me than being cold. I like notoriously just despise being cold. And this was a really bizarre and peculiar situation because I was cold and I just had no way of getting warm. I was naked and tied to a table and I couldn't move. And I just didn't know what was going to happen. And then I heard the door open and footsteps coming down the stairs. And then there was this man. Birthday man. And he was surprised. And he looked at me. And he said, "You're very beautiful." And my parents didn't believe in therapy, really. My parents were good New Englanders, right? Like, they just believed in suffering. And we come from Puritan stock, you know, like, you just are, like, you're just going to hell no matter what, so just suffer. And when I was about 9 years old, this actual therapist, a real live one, moved in next door to my parents' house on our little street. And if you've read my book or have followed my blog, I've talked a lot about this person. His name is Anthony. And he changed my life. He was in his mid-30s and didn't have any kids, and I was seeking a mentor. And we met and we just instantly fell in love with each other. And by the time I was in my mid-teens, we had become best friends, which really weirded out the entire neighborhood. And he kind of adopted me, and he taught me a lot of things that the other adults in my life weren't teaching me. He taught me about yoga and meditation and the idea of mindfulness. And he also talked a lot about the idea of radical compassion. The idea that everybody, no matter who they are, where they're from, or what they've done, everybody deserves compassion. And when I was 15 or so, I actually found this very hard to swallow. I was also reading a lot of Ayn Rand at the time. I know. Everyone has to go through that phase right along with the cure when they're 15. And I remember like sitting on his couch where we hung out a lot in his office, and he was explaining, you know, the idea of radical compassion to me, and I was like, that sounds good in theory, but not actually in practice. Like, what about murderers? You know, you're not going to tell me that murderers deserve compassion. And he was like, no, yeah, especially now. How dark must it be in there for them to do that, Amanda? And I was like, literally everyone, even my parents. And I loved Anthony so deeply that actually, since I was a drama kid, I had this trick. If I was in a play and I needed to make myself cry, all I had to do was close my eyes and imagine Anthony dying. And I would start to weep. That's how much he meant to me. But he was also kind of a weird paradox. You know, he had come from an Italian, super Catholic Italian family and sort of forsaken them and become a hippie and a therapist. But he also, you know, he had these sort of confusing, conflicting things about him. He was really into compassion, and he was vegan, and he meditated. He was also really into guns and had a weapon collection. Very American paradox. He gave me my first can of mace when I went overseas. He was like, compassion for all people. You're gonna make me these people are fucking crazy. And one of the things that made Anthony such a good mentor is that he never told me what to do. All the adults were always telling me what to do. And I hate being told what to do. And Anthony wouldn't tell me what to do, even when it got to the point that I trusted him so much that I would beg him to tell me what to do. You know, especially when I got into college and older, and I had all these like decisions to make, and I just would have like piles of pros and cons. And I just was at a crossroads and didn't know, like, do I leave this person? Do I move to the city? Do I leave grad school? I don't know. Like, you're old, you're smart, you tell me. Just tell me what to do. And he would say, no, Beauty, you're missing the point. There was one time he sort of broke this rule. I was 19, and I had fallen in love with this guy that I was at college with. He was a painter, and we had been really, passionately in this relationship for a few months, and I couldn't wait to bring him home to introduce him to Anthony. But I knew so little back then, and I was so naive, and I did not understand that my boyfriend was a heroin addict. And I drove him home this one weekend to meet Anthony, and we had brunch in this fabulous restaurant, and my boyfriend nodded off at the table. And Anthony, who had worked with addicts for 20 years, was like, oh my God. And I, who knew nothing, was like, oh wow, my boyfriend's super tired. And Anthony took me aside after this brunch and said, listen, Beauty, I am not going to tell you what to do. So I broke up with her own boyfriend. And that was in the fall. And on Christmas, he died. I got the call when I was home for Christmas break from one of our housemates. And a couple days after that, my grandmother died. And a couple months after that, within a few weeks of each other, my grandfather died, and my older brother Carl died. He got Lou Gehrig's disease totally randomly, and he was gone. And I was 19 and had no capacity to know how to deal with any of this. And to make things weirder, I had just gone to school overseas. I was studying in Germany, and I had no community, no friends. Easy access to alcohol for the first time in my life. That was very, very interesting. And I spent a lot of nights calling Anthony. Collect. Remember that? Phone booths? Calling Anthony collect from phone booths in Germany. Very, very drunk. Can you just tell me what to do? And he would say, Beauty, I can't. I don't know. I called him almost every day while I was away. And the thing that I didn't fully piece together until recently is right around that time, I stopped writing music completely. I had been so prolific and so excited and constantly writing, and all of a sudden I hit a dry spell of about 4 years where I barely wrote a thing. And I used to blame it on, college was shitty, or the situation, in Germany, I didn't have access to a piano. It never occurred to me that actually what was really happening is that everybody in my life died. And I was in grief and depressed. And this is the thing that's so frustrating about being a gothy songwriter, is like you're convinced that when grief and trauma and terrible things happen to you, if you've got one job to do, it's to take those things and at least make them into something useful for everybody else. But I couldn't. I was paralytic, which made the whole situation 10,000 times worse, because on top of being depressed and dealing with grief, I also felt guilty and like a shitty artist. But then things started to improve because I left college and I started a band. And I know you guys know my band probably. It was the Trust Minerals. And all of a sudden, everything changed because I had a community and I had people who actually seemed to want to listen to our songs, and I started writing all the time. And I had an amazing partner in my band, Brian Biglione, best drummer ever, and also he had a lot more experience than I did. And I was really scared and had a lot of stage fright in those early days, and Brian would talk me off the ledge a lot. I remember being in dressing rooms crying and being like, how can I go out there? There's only 5 people. And how can we sing these songs for the 5 people? And there are not even 5 people here to see us. It's just the girlfriends of the guys in the band. That's the thing. And they made us, and Brian's like, listen! We're a fucking punk band! I don't care if there's 5 people out there or 5,000 fucking people! We're gonna go out there, we're gonna beat the shit out of those instruments! We're gonna rock this! Get out there! And I did not know how lucky I was. Like, Brian actually believed in me. He was the first person who deeply believed in my songwriting. And I don't think I would be here now without him. It wouldn't have happened. And so, we built this beautiful community of weirdos, and our shows were incredibly weird and inclusive. And, the Boston music scene at the time, you gotta remember, this was like the year 2000, 2001. Everything was about plaid and indie rock and shoegaze. Now think about the Dresden Dolls. We did not fit in, and people fucking hated our band. We were known in Boston as the gay mime band. And I did not realize that doing this job as a profession was going to mean that I had to get used to criticism on a daily basis. But also, we had all these people who loved our music and were touched by it and came to us, after every show saying, thank you for this music. It helped me. It got me through my, suicide attempts. It helped me through a rape. It helped me through my grandmother's death. And I was like, let's believe those people. Let's ignore those people and believe those people. And that's sort of how we cut our furrow, and everything was on the up and up and up and up, and I was really, really prolific in writing a ton of music until about 2013, when my life kind of hit the wall again. And a lot of things happened at once. I did this huge Kickstarter, and that created a lot of controversy, but mostly the kind of controversy it created was from people who didn't really get my community. I was like, you just don't understand. We come from folk and punk, where it's not weird for people to help each other, and you just don't understand, and I will try to explain, and I will do a TED Talk, fuck off. And it was fine. And then the Boston bombing happened. And when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, you have to understand, this happened about 10 blocks from my apartment. And Neil and I, my husband, were living in Boston at the time. And nothing like this had ever happened in my community. There had never been blood flowing in the streets and the police telling everyone that we had to stay in our houses because there was a manhunt on. And right at this time, I wrote a poem called Poem for Jahar that was about the 19-year-old kid, the younger of the two brothers that carried out the bombing. And you've got to understand that this kid went to high school 2 towns away from me and played soccer with my friends' kids. That's how close to home it was. And this poem wasn't even a very good poem, but the point of it was that it kind of dared to empathize with him and try to figure out what was going on through his head after having killed all these people. Because I knew that this kid and I had to have things in common. We came basically from the same town. We did have things in common, I could tell. We both felt scared and isolated, misunderstood, whatever. And my community read this poem and they were like, oh, nice poem, whatever. And then a right-wing blog got a hold of the poem. And my life changed. Because I was used to getting criticism like, you are fat, you are hairy, you can't sing, whatever. This was a new kind of criticism where people were telling me that I should be killed, and I should be raped, and I should have a bomb shoved up my cunt every 5 seconds on Twitter. It was terrifying. But still, I was like, it's the crazy right-wing people. I can ignore them. They just need a target, and that happens to be me. They just don't understand us. And then the Boston Music Press got a hold of this story. And that's where things got really, really upended. Because the Boston Music Press said, listen, Amanda, it's great that you believe in compassion, but you don't seem to understand there are actually lines and you have crossed them. There are people for whom we do not have compassion. That kid, you have fucked up. And I didn't agree. And all of a sudden, I started feeling a kind of loneliness and isolation from everybody that I had never felt before. Because I started realizing that everything I thought everyone over here believed, well, maybe they didn't. And it was scary. And what none of these people knew, and none of these people knew, is the only reason Neil and I were in Boston to begin with is because I had just gotten the news that my best friend, Anthony, had been given a fatal cancer diagnosis. He had leukemia, and he was given 6 months to live. And for the first time since I was 19, I stopped writing. I felt like I didn't really have anything to say to anyone, and maybe people didn't want to hear what I had to say anyway. Until I was traveling around doing these Kickstarter house parties. And on my way to Nashville, Tennessee, to do one of these parties, someone emailed a death threat into my website. And I kind of hit rock bottom on the way to this party. I remember sitting in this hotel right before going to the person's house and getting an idea for a song, but I didn't have a piano. I just had my stupid fucking ukulele with me so I could play People Creep by Radiohead. And I thought, maybe I don't even need to write anything good. Maybe it's enough to just write anything. Something honest. Something that I don't ever have to play at a concert. I could just play it for these 20 people, and maybe that's enough. I just have to write it really fast because the party's in an hour. You think I'd shut their children from the way that they're talking, and there's no point in responding. And you guys know that there's 100 ways this story could go, right? He looked at me and he said, "This is wrong. I'm going to untie you so you can put your clothes on. This is wrong. I'm going to untie you." And I realized that I dodged a bullet, right? I didn't dodge every bullet after that, but I dodged that one. And this is also a good time to point out that if you've never seen me in concert before and you just read about this show in some random newspaper listing, you might be really freaking out at this point. Like, holy shit, what have I done? And there's 3 more hours. It's okay. First of all, you can always leave. But I also I have a plan for this that I sort of developed over the course of the tour, because this show is like fucking relentlessly sad, and it's not completely fair. So I will make a deal with you, which is you also have agency, and if at any point you just can't fucking take it anymore, you are allowed to stand up and yell, "Amanda, I'm too sad!" And I will play you the opening chords of Coin Operated Boy. Okie doke. Speaking of being too sad, I've been too sad, actually. I have had the roughest couple weeks of recent history. You may know what I'm talking about, and you may not. If you know what I'm talking about, it's because you spend all of your time on Twitter. If you don't, it's because you don't. And I have noticed that the world has become very, very compartmentalized and siloed in this way, which is really interesting in itself. So a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a tweet thread that was honestly, by all means, not my finest hour. You know, it was one of these moments where my ego was definitely showing. And it was a thread linking to my, this new Medium article that Jack Nichols, this great Australian journalist, had written, who had come on tour with me with this photographer, and and I talked about how I was inspired to do it because the Guardian newspaper wouldn't review this tour or record, and I was angry. And, and what began as kind of like a spar between an artist and a media outlet, which would have all been fine and friendly, devolved in a way that I've actually gotten used to, because I've been through 12 of these. And like the sewer lid was opened, and all of a sudden, it was just a cesspit, and like the listicles of 20 reasons you should hate Amanda Palmer surfaced, and on and on. And I have dealt with enough of this that things were actually okay, and it was hard and annoying, and I went in and had to like admit that I was wrong and apologize, but also, some of the stuff that was coming up was really horrific. You and your hook-nosed Jew boyfriend should just die. And I was like, oh God, it's, Twitter and all the extremists are coming out. But even that I could handle. But then something happened that I couldn't really handle. It was the Saturday night 2 weekends ago before my show in Portugal, and I opened up my laptop and I saw a tweet rumor that I had caused the suicide of my ex-boyfriend. And it had hundreds of retweets and likes. And I looked at it, and I lost it. I had to run to the bathroom to vomit, and then I went into 24 hours of basically having a panic attack. And I just deleted Twitter off my phone. I just couldn't engage. And, it is one thing to have, like, a spar with the media and a conversation about, whether or not I am too entitled or narcissistic, because sometimes I am. But this crossed a crazy line. Like, this person was basically calling me a murderer. And it's the internet, right? Like, people will say things on the internet that they will not say to your face. But I also realized, weirdly, even in the context of this show and tour, this person had ripped open a loosely bound wound that really just got me in my weakest spot. Because that actually has happened to me in person. And I talk about it in this show. When I was 17, I had my first abortion, because I've had several. And as far as abortions go, it was actually not that traumatic, and it was pretty ordinary. I had a birth control slip-up with my boyfriend, who I had been together with for a couple of years, and we were deeply in love. We had been together, as a matter of fact, since he untied me. And I was very afraid to tell my mother, but I did, and she was incredibly understanding and non-judgmental, and told me that she would support me no matter what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I want to finish high school. And she made the appointment at Planned Parenthood, and I went in with my mother and my boyfriend. And, and at 17, I was really, really committed to being a songwriter and an artist. And I knew I wanted to be the kind of songwriter that explored the dark. And I really wanted to write about this abortion. And I could not figure out how. And writing a song about abortion is so hard for the same reason that it's hard to just talk about it with anyone, because it's really hard to get the tone right. You just know that you're going to get it wrong, and that you're going to piss someone off, and you're going to say something the wrong way. And how do you write, who's the voice in a song about abortion? You know, how do you do it without being too defensive, or too political, or too sentimental? And I had these really, really strong memories from that day, especially the fact that the most painful part of the day wasn't the abortion procedure. It was the walk from the car to the building. That was the most physically painful part of the day. And this was 1993 in liberal Massachusetts. And in order to get from the car with my boyfriend and mom to the building, we had to walk through a throng of people, through them. People holding giant photographs of bloody fetuses, screaming at me right in my face. You're a murderer! You're a murderer! I was 17, and I thought I was so cool, and I was this swashbuckling punk feminist, and I was like, these people just don't understand anything. But I had never actually had a human being look at me and say that, and mean it. And I wanted so badly to be able to write about this, and I tried, and I failed, and I tried, and I failed, and it became like my white whale of songwriting. And then, when I put out my first solo record, I did this. When I got to the party, they gave me authority, and I must have been thirsty because I drank it so quick. When I got to the bedroom, there was somebody waiting, and it isn't my fault that the barbarian raped. When I went to get tested, I brought along my best friend, Melissa Maloney, who once been molested, and she knew how to get there. She knew all the nurses. They were all really friendly, but my test came out positive. I've seen better days, but I don't care. I just said all that I remember. When I got my abortion, when I got my abortion, I brought along my boyfriend. We got there an hour before the appointment. Then outside the building, there were all these single fundamentalist Christians who try to ignore. I've seen better days, but I don't care. Oasis got my letter in my mail. Do you hear the Beach Boys and Hearts? And the Beatles and the Beatles, ready to go? Of the song, so like do it. You're British, you can chill. The Beatles, be the Beatles with me. Ready? Be the abortion Beatles. 1, 2, 3, 4. And vacation was over, the work was all over, that I was a crack whore, Melissa had told them. And so now we're not talking, except we have tickets to see Blur in October, and I think we're still going. I've seen better days, but I don't care. I just got a letter in my mail. Is it sad photographs all around everything? Melissa's gonna wet herself, I swear. Ooh. You know, there were some right-wing conservative websites and people and stuff who thought the song was terrible, and I was like, good, of course, you're supposed to think that. I'm a woman even saying the word abortion in a song. But what shocked me is there were some feminist journalists who really, really hated this song. And that I was not expecting. And I remember what one of them wrote word for word. She said that the thing that is wrong with this song is that it makes light of date rape and abortion. And that is not okay. The song is basically a rape joke. It's important, I think, also to point out that that was an American feminist. Most of the feminists in the UK were like, oh, this is pretty funny. American feminists tend to have a little bit more of an irony deficiency. And I remember defending the song at the time on the grounds of just that, like irony, satire, sarcasm, really important in art. It has a long history. Do I need to explain this again and again? And I kept defending it on the grounds of irony and satire, and yet, when I look back at what happened when I was 17, you know, the whole thing about the abortion that I experienced, and one of the most salient things about it, is that I didn't tell fucking anybody. You didn't. Nobody knew. One day I was at Planned Parenthood getting an abortion. The next day I was back in high school, going to French class, pretending everything was fine. So I look back and I actually think I was defending the song on the wrong grounds. That song isn't actually irony. It's just the truth in a major key. The dark truth in a major key. And like with so many of these, I wish I could turn the clock back and right back to that journalist, because she actually fed me the perfect comeback and I missed it. The song makes light of date rape and abortion. I wish I could go back and say, you think this song makes light of date rape and abortion? I'm an artist. If I have a job to make anything, that is literally my fucking job. To go into the dark and make light. That may be my job. And there's also this weird, subtle power that music has. And I think that if I had changed this song very, very, very slightly, like one note in it, this note to this note, and I had turned the tempo down like 5%, and it sounded like this. When I got to the party, they gave me a 40, and I must have been thirsty, cause I drank it. I have the feeling that those same feminist journalists would have been like, date rape, abortion, sad, bad, song, sad, good. But that can't be the way that we make our art, or we're just fucked. There has to be more room for the mass. And I went through most of the rest of my 20s, you know, not really thinking very much about whether I wanted to have children. You know, I was busy, my band was touring all the time, I was pretty much single through my entire 20s. It was just not something I thought I had to think about. I remember constantly going like, I will figure it out later when I am old. When I am 35, I will figure out whether or not I want to have a child. And then in my early 30s, as I'm sure most of you know, I got married to a very wonderful and very strange man. And Neil already had 3 grown children. His children were, a teenager and in their 20s when we met. And we barely even talked about, whether or not we would have children. Like, we were so busy, him with his giant life and me with mine. And right after we got married, we went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival to just have a wonderful time and do a couple of shows and spend time together and, celebrate Bohemian land. And I was really sick. I had a bad urinary tract infection, and I went to a doctor. And the doctor, before he prescribed me the antibiotics, was like, "Is there any way you're pregnant?" And I was like, "There's no fucking way." So a week later, I found out I was pregnant. And after getting over the initial shock of, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" I remembered, "Oh fuck, write the antibiotic." And I called our doctor back in America. I told him what was happening, and he said, "Read me the bottle. Read me the name of the antibiotic." So I got it, and I read it to him, and he went, "Ooh, I'm sorry, Amanda. This one's not going to happen for you and me. You're going to have to terminate this pregnancy." And I remember feeling so guilty that I actually felt relieved that I wasn't going to have to make this decision, because I did not know what I would have done. I didn't know. And I also didn't know how you go about getting an abortion. I was in Scotland and didn't know anything, and I was really lucky. I had some friends who knew a gynecologist, and she swooped me under her wing and into her clinic and gave me an abortion pill, and it was all very simple. And the next night, I had a show. I was on the Evelyn tour, performing in one half of a conjoined twin trance with my sister, Jason Webley, who was a very understanding twin that week, while I went through all this physically and he was attached to me in his dress. And, I found myself thinking, I remember being 17 and it being so terrible that this was all so secret and so shameful and so compartmentalized. Maybe there's a different way out of this, but I also just didn't know what the etiquette was. Do you tell someone that you're having an abortion? And we were in fringe land. Everyone was partying and drinking and dressing rooms and pubs. And so I decided to start experimenting, and someone would be like, "Hey, Nana, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Hi, I'm shitty. I had an abortion on Tuesday." And looking back, what I realized I was afraid of wasn't that any of these artists or friends were going to judge me ethically. I knew that they wouldn't. What I was afraid of is that I was going to burden them with this shitty, unnecessary, personal, morose information. Why should they have to know this and carry this around for the rest of the night? And what was amazing is that every single person I told did not look burdened. They all looked relieved. Everyone. Because everybody had a story. Everybody. The first person I told was my friend Andrew O'Neill, who's a great stand-up comic, and he gave me permission to use this story. And I said, "Yeah, I had an abortion on Tuesday." And he was like, "Oh my God, this happened to me last year. Stephanie and I got a kid. She got pregnant at Fringe, but then it was really complicated. She had to go to the hospital for 3 days, and we weren't telling anyone. And I was having to do shows every night, going back and forth to the hospital. I was, how are you? Are you all right? How are you doing?" And the next person I told had had an abortion 6 months ago, and the next person I told had just taken her sister to get an abortion. And I was like, "Fuck, is it everybody?" And actually, statistically, it's a lot of people. You look at the statistics, and there's a lot of people who know a lot of people, or are partnered with a lot of people, or have siblings and friends and cousins. It is this thing that touches everyone, and no one talks about it. And that stuck with me. And then things got complicated because I turned 35. I remember actually waking up on my 35th birthday because I had just had this line for so long that it was this magical age where I would know whether or not I wanted to have children. And I remember waking up, seriously, on my 35th birthday, alone in bed, and going, and I didn't know. I just did not fucking know. I was so ambivalent that it started driving me crazy. And I started doing what I always do when I'm confused about something, which is I started like canvassing and like terrorizing and interrogating all of my friends. And like asking everybody I knew, that, you know, the old people who did or didn't have children, the artists, the people who had just had babies, and I was calling everyone and going like, can you tell me what to do? And not really Amanda. And like everyone sort of had advice, but the advice just kept piling up on either side. It was so fucking useless. No one could tell me what to do. And at this point, Anthony was also dealing with a cancer that had been a death sentence, but then it got lifted, but then it got reinstated, and then it got lifted again. So Neil and I were stuck in Boston, and you know, and I was there as sort of Anthony's ersatz daughter, taking him to chemo. And Anthony hadn't had children, and I remember telling him, you know, like, I just don't know. I don't know what to do. Like, what do you think? And he was like, well, I didn't have kids, and I was pretty happy with that decision. And I was like, right. But also, you're dying of cancer. It's complicated. And I remember asking Neil one day to just like decide for me. I was like, you must have a strong opinion about this. And he was like, no. So I have to decide. Yep. And I would get this like really conflicting information from you. I remember calling one friend in the same phone conversation, practically in the same breath. He had just had kids. And he was like, so you don't really know what you want to do? And I was like, no, and I'm completely confused. Like, I'm really happy with my life. I don't feel anything missing. I do not feel some like biological clock ticking and some urge to have children. But I think maybe I should want to. And he was like, Amanda, stop. I just had children. Let me just tell you, if you are not sure you want to do this thing, don't do this thing. On the other hand, children are the most magical, whimsical, creative, inspiring little beings in the world. And I swear to God, if you have babies, you'll never regret it. Over me. You also have to realize I was an international touring artist at the time. Like, I was flying everywhere touring. I didn't really have friends with kids. I was the youngest of 4 kids growing up. Like, I just didn't have any experience with pregnancy or babies. And the only children that I had any exposure to were in airports. And the only parents I had any exposure to were also in airports with those children, and they looked unhappy. All of them. This was also this specific moment in time. I do not know if you remember this specific moment in time when Frozen was everywhere. It was like this inescapable, awful fucking force of marketing just bearing down on you wherever you went, especially in airports. And all of the families and children that I would see in airports were all just like bedecked with Frozen merchandise and Frozen boots and Frozen bags and Frozen sippy cups and Frozen fucking everything. And I was just like, I don't see myself there with the Frozen people. I just don't see it. And I had this friend at the time who I really respected a lot, Melissa Aftermauer, this amazing musician who I actually met in London. And she had just had a child. She had a 3-year-old, and she had, sort of changed her life around and stopped touring. And I called her, and I was like, "Could I just come observe you?" And she was like, "That's weird. Okay." So I moved into her basement for a week. And you also have to understand, like, one of my biggest fears about having children is that I would just become a bad artist and I wouldn't know it. Right? Like, this terrible thing would happen to me, and motherhood would just like cover me with this blanket of suck. And I would start writing songs about like nice things and balance and meadows and how everything was going to be just fine, and no one would tell me. My songwriting would just like slither into a world of like shitty, mundane stuff. And I remember saying to Melissa, like, "Has that happened to you? Like, are you still a good artist? Are you still cool? And what do you do about Frozen? How do you do about screens?" And she was like, "Well, we have a rule. Like, she doesn't have any screens, but we do have a TV on the second floor of the house, and it's only attached to a VHS machine, and the only VHS tapes we have are Fellini films." Okay, that's an option, I guess. And then I got pregnant. And that was complicated, because I assumed that if I got pregnant, my choice would become incredibly clear. And it didn't. And that scared the shit out of me. I saw a really comforting statistic in the New York Times a couple of months ago that said that 20% of people who look at a positive pregnancy stick do not know what they're going to do. And the fact that the ambivalence and the indecision followed me into pregnancy was the scariest thing of all. And I actually started to go a little bit crazy because I just could not figure out my own thoughts. And no one could tell me what to do. And I would like read an article about climate change and be like, "No fucking way am I having children." And then I would see, a family in the street and some woman pushing the stroller and start crying and just not know. And I was so afraid of my own uncertainty that I was pretty sure that I wasn't supposed to be a mother, because if I was this uncertain, how could this be meant to be? And I was literally changing my mind from one day to the next. And Neil was so sweet. He was like, "I will support you no matter what you choose." But what do you choose? I was changing my mind so much about this that Neil started calling it Schrodinger's baby. And I remember, I had this few weeks of complete hell, and I was still working and touring. I remember calling Anthony from the airport, and Anthony had taken a turn for the worse and was dealing with a bone marrow transplant. And I remember calling him up when I was like at my rope's end and saying, "Listen, I really don't want to bother you with this. I know you're dying. Can't you just give me this one, like a parting gift? Please. Can you just tell me what to do?" He hung up on me. And I really thought that if I could take one thing out of this hellish purgatory indecision experience, it could at least be something artistic. And I sat down a couple times and tried to write about this indecision. And again, I found it really, really hard. And then I realized there was already a song for this occasion. I'm going to play it for you, but you guys also have to do kind of an exercise with me. This song only works if you imagine it sung simultaneously by different narrators. So you have to hold different voices in your head. Can you do this for me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the first voice is like me, the artist, filled with indecision and like loving her life and working on her book, but also feeling kind of confused and ambivalent and not sure. Like over there is Frozen, and she isn't sure whether she wants to be part of that world. And then the second narrator is the imagined mother, in this artist's head who's over there and like, you know, she's like carrying frozen backpacks and juice packs and dripping with breast milk and like covered with children, and looking back at the artist who's like, you know, wearing a kimono and holding a martini and smoking a cigarette and dancing blissfully with no responsibilities, and yet, you know, that there is sort of like this tension between the mother looking back and thinking that she wants to go back to that world, and the artist, and then the third, so that's the second voice. The third voice is look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think I'm the girl that has everything? Are you doing it? It's good, right? Okay. If you want extra credit, you can add a fourth voice. You're just gonna have to think very, very fast. It's like having a Rolodex of characters in your head. The fourth voice is the vagina. And it helps, first of all, it helps if you imagine the vagina actually singing. It also helps if you imagine a, like, angry, neglected vagina. Look at this trove. Treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold? Looking around, you think, sure. She's got everything. I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty. I've got who's its and what's its galore. You want to think of the bobs? I've got 20. But who cares? No big deal. I want more. I want to be where the people are. I want to see them dancing, walking around on those, what do you call it? Feet. Flipping your fins, you don't get too far. Legs are required for jumping, dancing, strolling along down a, fuck, what's that word again? Streets of where they walk, of where they run, of where they stay all day in the sun. Hold this until you spin that fucking disco ball, someone. Wandering free. Wish I could be part of that Thank you for going on that journey with me. So, in the end, my ambivalence wound up being its own decision. And I decided to get an abortion. And Neil and I were staying in New York City in this shitty Midtown hotel, both doing work. Neil was about to leave town, so we had a really short window. And I was about to get a really brutal lesson in the American healthcare system. So again, like, I didn't really know what you did. You know, my mom had called Planned Parenthood, my Scottish friends had helped me, and I did what I think a lot of people in America are doing right now. We just Googled abortion near shitty midtown hotel. And there are a lot of places you could get an abortion in Manhattan, and I just chose the one that was closest to us, and I called, and I should have known that something was wrong with this place when I wasn't given an actual appointment time. But I was put in a block and told to just come at 8 with everyone else who was coming at 8. And yeah, I showed up at this place, and it was really low rent, and there was bulletproof glass at the reception counter. And I checked in, and basically, like, everyone was given a number, and we just stayed in this really, really dismal waiting room. Made of cinder block, and everyone sitting there in folding chairs. There was about 20 people, almost all women, and everyone was just sitting there on their phones, looking sad. And the worst thing about this room, as we sat there and waited, was there was a gigantic television screen blaring an Adam Sandler movie. It was the most inhumane. And I was so torn and still weirdly ambivalent about this decision, but I just sort of sat there with like my resolve draining out of me. And finally they called me, and Neil and I stood up and started to walk in, and they said, he can't come with you, he's got to stay out here. And I was like, what? And they shuffled me in, and I got an ultrasound, and then I was put into a little vestibule before the procedure room with about 5 or 6 other women, and this place was so low-fi that there was nowhere to put our belongings. So every woman was given a plastic laundry basket. And after we put our hotel gowns, our hospital gowns on, we just had to put all of our stuff in these baskets, our clothes, our shoes, our phones. And it was freezing, and we all sat there shivering, holding all of our shit in our laps. And I remember looking at the line of us, thinking, like, I feel like I'm in an abortion factory. No one has asked me how I am. Is this what it is? Is this what it's like? And the girl next to me was about 14. And I remember trying to make eye contact with her, and she was totally gone. So I remember thinking, like, fuck, I'm in my 30s. I can kind of handle this, right? Like, and even I'm kind of falling apart right now, but she's 14. Like, what is going on in her head? What happened to her? Is she alone? Is someone taking care of her? Like, why did she wind up here? Did she get tied to the table? And then they called her in. And then they called me in. And everything happened very, very fast. There were 2 nurses and a doctor. They said, get on the table, please, put your feet in the stirrups. And I put my feet in the stirrups, and I laid back, and the doctor snapped on his gloves, and I started to cry. And I was so embarrassed. I said, oh God, I'm sorry. Can you just give me a minute? And the doctor looked at me and said, you've got 1 minute. And I said, I'm really sorry. I know you're busy. I think I might need more than a minute, but I'm good. I'm sorry to do this, but do you mind if I just get down and go back into the vestibule, and you could just send another person in, and I'll be ready in just a minute. And they said, fine. So I took my feet out of the stirrups, I got at the table. I went back into the little room, and I sent the next one. And then the nurse checked in on me. Are you ready to go? And I was like, okay, we just need a second. We just send the next person. Okay, we just need a second. And I sat there thinking, I am insane. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. I could get up right now and my entire life would change. And this would actually be a really amazing story to tell. a child. It's a bad reason to not get an abortion. Don't do that. And as I was thinking that, the nurse came out and she said, listen, the doctor's not going to see you today, even if you're ready now. You're too indecisive. So you've got a choice. You can either leave your deposit and come back tomorrow, or you can take your deposit and go home. And I looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry. I know how busy you guys are, but can I just ask you a question? And she said, sure. And I said, is this a thing? Like, does this happen? She looked at me and she said, oh, honey. This happens all the time. Maybe we'll see tomorrow. And I put my clothes back on and I went back into the Adam Sandler hell lobby where Neil was sitting, and as soon as the whole thing was over, and we went out into the hallway so we could get some privacy, and I looked at him and I said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And he went, okay. So we're going to have a baby. And I went, I don't know, honey, I'm sorry. I just couldn't get the Adam Sandler abortion. And we went for a walk through the park, and we both cried, and then we went back to our hotel, and we did, again, what I think a lot of people in America are doing every day. We re-Googled. Nice abortion. Yeah, shitty hotel. And who knew? 10 more blocks away for $400 more. You could get a nice abortion. And we made a real appointment, and we went in the next day, and these really lovely women greeted us at the door and gave Neil a cup of tea, gave me a cup of tea, sat down and talked to us. And it was a private practice, and Neil got to come in and hold my hand while they did the procedure. And when it was all over, and everybody left so that I could get dressed, I remember breaking down and crying. Because I felt guilty. And I didn't feel guilty about the abortion. That I had made peace with. I felt guilty because I started thinking about the 14-year-old girl. And how she didn't know. Or even if she knew, she couldn't afford the nice abortion. And I also remember weirdly looking at the ceiling and thinking, God, these women were so kind and so compassionate and so non-judgmental. I think I might actually want to have a child someday. It's ironic timing on that. But I also don't know if I would have had that thought ever if I had had the Adam Sandler abortion. And I'll never know what happens to that 14-year-old girl, and I'll never know what that experience did to her. It's hard to know. Anyway, something changed and something shifted in me. And not too long after that, I did get pregnant again, and I was really excited. I don't know what exactly changed, something in me, something in my relationship with Neil, something in my relationship to the world, something shifted, and I was just ready to say yes. Neil wasn't suspicious. He was afraid we were going to have Schrodinger too. And I was just really sure. But my pregnancy was very, very complicated by the fact that Anthony was on this slope towards death the entire time I was pregnant. And even then we weren't sure he was going to die because there kept being these miraculous, miracle cures to his cancer, and the bone marrow transplant was going to maybe work, but then it wasn't going to work. And we were just living in this hell of not even knowing where we were going to live because we didn't want to leave him alone. in Boston, and when I was 7 months pregnant, we were here in London, and I got the phone call from our friend Nicholas. You need to come home right now. It's time. And I said, really, sure? He said, yeah. You need to come home. And I said, okay, well, we're both working here, but I think we can probably get home by Friday. And he said, oh, no, Amanda, I mean right now. So we hailed the cab. And we went to Heathrow, and we found the first flight to London, to Boston, and we got on a plane, and we rushed to Anthony's house. And we got to be there when he died. And I remember holding him. I was hugely pregnant. My belly was like out to here at the time, and I remember holding him along with Neil while he took his last breath. And I don't actually believe in reincarnation, but I do remember thinking, like, God, if it exists, this is so convenient. But I also remember thinking, like, death is not what so many people made it out to be. Like, we're taught that death is so scary and gross, and that we don't want to be around the dying and the dead. But I actually really liked being with Anthony while he was dying. It felt like an honor. And even hanging out for the next day with his dead body, because we kept him at home for a while. I just remember thinking, God, like, there's so much they don't tell you. And I also had to come up with a new trick for how to cry, because I couldn't think about Anthony dying anymore, but I have one. If I want to make myself cry nowadays, all I have to do is think about the fact that he missed meeting my son by 2 months. Like, they were this close. They never got to meet. And my friends threw a memorial for Anthony not long after that. And I had been pretty distracted and busy by pregnancy and Anthony's cancer and stuff, and I hadn't written anything in a long time. And this memorial was going to happen in a little church in our town that I knew had a piano. And the night before the memorial, I remember thinking, God, Anthony never got a song. And if I don't write it tonight, I might never write it, because tomorrow, if I play it, I'll get to play it for the people who know him, who know the paradox. You know, Anthony, the vegan, compassionate yogi, and the fucking one who's obsessed with guns. The older I got and the more Anthony and I became close, I really started understanding what that was all about. And Anthony, he wrote about it a little bit towards the end of his life, but he'd been badly abused as a kid. And all of the guns and knives were his way of desperately wanting to defend himself and the people he loved. He had this terrible joke, especially towards the end. He used to threaten me that in his will, he was going to leave me all his weapons. He was such an asshole. Don't want them. So I sat there in my apartment that night thinking, I could do it, I just have to do it fast. Because the memorial's tomorrow. I never let the box of knives you said was a paradox, because you're kind but with stitch I took it not. You were blind on the love that was safe, and so you learned to fight. Never let the box of knives you said was a paradox, because you're kind but with stitch I took it not. You were blind on the love that was safe, and so you learned to fight. What do I do with this stuff? It seems like yesterday I called you up. And you took your shame, and you sliced the lines that wrapped around me, and you said, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'll just keep on cutting. It's worth a little blood to get your arms free. I've never got the box of nights you said was a paradox, because you're kind but wasted a child in the box. You lied down love like the same, so you learned to fight. I've never got the box of nights you said was a paradox, because you're kind but wasted a child in the box. You lied down love like the same, so you learned to fight. Love to the sun. It seems like yesterday I was alone. I kept on covering the soft parts up. I didn't know how to get them all. I didn't know how to get them all. And you took your shame, and you hacked through the wood in the surrounding, and you said, I don't know where I'm going, I just know that I'm heading from until things fire. I have never ever lost some nights. I took it to the ocean side the day you died. I stood out on the dock no matter how hard I tried. I couldn't drop it in and I collapsed and cried. Why do the stuff? It seems like yesterday you were alive, but it's as if you never really died. And it's as if you never really died. And you took your shame. You said, Bill, guess who's seriously beauty? You said, see, you get the drill, now don't you? It's not what I want, you can't keep making symbols out of nothing. So I take your it's just like empty matter. It's Dumbledore's magic feather. You don't need me here to cut you. 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 Dick. So I have good news for you, which is we are about to take an intermission. Well, good news and bad news. That's the good news. The bad news is there's still one more song, and it's really long. Sorry, that's alright. Most of the songs on this album clock in at about 8 minutes. This is what happens when you're not on a major label for this long. You just stop giving any fucks. So then I gave birth and I had to decide how to have this child. And one thing I knew is after being in hospitals for about 4 years nonstop with Anthony and chemo and bone marrow transplants and another friend who got cancer at the same time, I just wanted to be very far away from hospitals, which seemed like a place for the dying. And Neil and I were kind of itinerant at the time. We didn't really have a home, and I was lucky. We found this amazing place in Tennessee, this old commune called The Farm, where these old wizened midwives, have been practicing natural childbirth and midwifery since the 70s. And we just moved into a cabin in the woods there for 6 weeks and did a totally off-grid natural childbirth. And I was in labor for 24 hours. And, I wanted to be far away from doctors and hospitals, because I'd also just sort of lost faith in the system a little bit. I wanted to be very far away from doctors with watches. I want to start a nonprofit called Doctors Without Watches. And we went to this beautiful place called The Farm, and when I was in labor, we went on a walk. And the walk took us to the farm cemetery. We sat there on a bench while I was in labor, trying to come up with a good name for this child. And we decided to call him Anthony. David, after Neil's dad, who had just died, and Carl, after my brother. Anthony, David, Carl, which was a mouthful, so we decided to give him a cute nickname. And we decided to call him Ash, which is what is left over after everything burns. Because we are goth. And I still had all of this baggage left over from the abortions and from the ambivalence and all of the struggling with the idea of motherhood. And I made this rule that I would not have any childcare until I broke. And Neil was like, why? And I was like, because I chose this child. I fucking chose. I must feel the full weight of motherhood crushing down upon my shoulders. And he was like, okay. I lasted 4 months. It was an insane 4 months. I basically just stumbled from moment to moment with this baby strapped to my boob, trying to figure out which way was up and failing most of the time. I got pretty much nothing creative done, but I did manage to squeeze in this one song. And the song actually came out of a challenge between me and my amazing twin sister, Jason Webley, because I had taken Ash on a visit to Jason's, and I was telling him how excited I was about my Patreon and having subscribers and having a way to just release music immediately and get paid, and how I was writing these songs like Machete and stuff really fast, and it was working. And he was like, "Good, let's do it tonight. Let's write 11 songs." And I was like, okay. It was just me. I was on the West Coast, Neil was back on the East Coast. It was just me and the baby, and I was like, who's gonna watch the baby? And he was like, I don't know. So we had to wait for the baby to fall asleep, which the baby did in Jason's accordion case, because I had no crib. And then we had this window of time nap time in which to write 11 songs. We did not write 11 songs. Jason wrote half a song about his local donut shop. And never finished it. It's actually a pretty good song. He should finish that one. It's got this amazing bridge that goes, this is the only part of the song I remember. It was this weird place that he had taken me to visit that day called Henry Donut, where a bunch of like weird, crusty Washington Republicans were hanging out. And we went in, it was very scary because it was right leading up to the election. I had my Bernie Sanders pen on and holding this child, and they were like, and the song went, do you want a donut? No, I do not want a donut. Are you sure you do not want a donut? Yes, I do not want a donut! If you see Jason, because he's actually coming to the show tonight, you should tell him to finish that song. It's pretty good. This is the one I wrote. The whole song was written in about 2 hours, and that's why it's so fucking long. There was no editing time. Our son is 4 months old, his name is Anthony, or Ash for short, and he's too small to do things by himself. We were in LA over Christmas in a rental, and we jury-rigged a place to change his diapers on a shelf. I was peeing in the bathroom and had left for just a second, cause I thought he couldn't move and he was safe. As I came out, I saw him falling in slow motion to the floor. It was probably the worst moment of my life. And then I accidentally stole a thing of chapstick from the Safeway. I didn't see it till I got out to the car. I would have usually returned it, but I was overwhelmed and late to take the baby to my cousins up in Carmel Bay. In my defense, I bought like $87 worth of groceries, and the chapstick was $1.99. I know it wasn't the right thing to use my newborn child as an excuse, but it felt like a good reason at the time. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, I cried. And as I pulled out on the highway, I said, right, at least the baby didn't die. At least the baby didn't die. And then we went to Sarasota to see Neil's cousin Helen for her birthday. She just turned 99. We were also there for Sydney, who was 90 for 2 days before, but he was sick, so mostly it was Ash and Helen time. She survived the Warsaw Ghetto, and she always says I love you when she sees you, cause she knows you never know. She worked for months while I was pregnant on a gorgeous handmade blanket. Her almost 100-year-old man's crocheting every row. I've been emailing her pictures of the baby with the blanket every day since she had sent it in the mail. But they were of one that someone else admitted she was really nice about it. And I went and shoplifted a pair of ugly sunglasses from Goodwill. They were on my head. I tried them on and left them there, but that's not really bad compared to when we left the baby in the car. At least he wasn't in there very doesn't and then we took a plane to Washington alone so we could visit Jason Webley, who's his godfather and plays a mean accordion. I couldn't wait to see him and share tales of our disasters over dinners in his houseboat. When I saw I'd lost my passport, so I got a rush appointment at the place where you replace them, and I drove the baby in, and on the way I got a speeding ticket. When the cop came to the window, I was shaking and I said, "I'm sorry," but you couldn't hear me. That's how loud the sound of screaming was, 'cause he was hungry, and I think that I was speeding, 'cause I panic when I hear him cry. My God, what kind of mother am I? And as I pulled out of the breakdown lane, I cried. And as I pulled out on the highway, I said, at least the baby didn't die. Right, at least the baby didn't die. While I was waiting for my passport, I was hungry, so I twittered for a coffee in the neighborhood. And there I saw a woman who was sitting at the bar, and it was noon and she was drinking, and she called across the diner to me, "How old is your baby?" And she smiled at us nursing, and she said she had a daughter who was grown, and then she paused and said she also had a son. And when I paid and was about to leave, I picked him up and crossed the room and touched her sleeve. I said, "Hey, this baby wanted to say hi." And she held him tight and started to cry. And I'm sorry if this story's gotten long, and that everybody's crying in this song. And then I got back to the car and turned the radio and heater on and sat there with the baby in the back. And they were talking about Syria and climate change and ISIS and the candidates' positions on Iraq. I feel so useless in this universe. I know I could be doing worse and trying hard to stay at peace inside. I know it's hard to be a parent, but this mess is so gigantic. I wonder if I should have had a child. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, I cried. And as I pulled out on the highway, I said, at least the babies can die. Thank you so much. Oh my God. Thank you. That was beautiful, baby. Hot dog and singing. Before we stay standing, because we're going to break for intermission in 2 seconds, I just wanted to bring someone up on stage. This is, many of you know this person. This is Alex, our merch queen. Alex has been working with me and the Dressed Bells for a very long time, running our UK merch store so that you do not have to pay shipping from the United States to get merch. And tonight he has come on stage to model our beautiful new hoodie. And this is a special item, and Alex is going to tell you why.
Basically, the planet is on fucking fire! But we still want merchandise, and I still want a job. So this thing is 100% recycled. It is 70% recycled cotton and 30% plastic bottles.
And this is the gig poster that we made for the London shows. And this painting was done by someone in the community in Germany who showed up at the show with this beautiful painting and was like, here, and I was like, can we steal that? So that's where that came from. And also, I want to remind you guys that we have hankies, and Act 2 is also fucking sad, so if you want a hanky, go buy one. And also, I'm touring the record, but I'm also touring this book that I made to go along with the record. It's a really beautiful photography book with essays and lyrics and a beautiful pull-out poster, and we've got sample copies. You can go look at it at the merch table. And also, if you're a patron, we have patron pins in the back, and also my team from New York, Michael and Haley, are in the house tonight, and they're going to be in the back during intermission to talk to you. If you have any questions about the Patreon, they will answer, and I think that's it. Is that it? So we're going to take about a 20-minute intermission. The bar is that way and will be open. I suggest alcohol. Merch is that way, and we will see you back here in about 20 minutes, and I agree with you.